Hi everybody, seems like we're poised to get started. Thank you so much for coming. Very briefly, my name's Will Freeman. I'm a journalist, editor, writer, those kind of things in the games industry. But you certainly don't need to hear much more about me. So we're here to talk about marketing in the game space. That's obviously quite a broad spectrum. But you know, marketing your game, your company, your service. You know, I guess, for one, as somebody that kind of, I guess on the PR side of it, I write about games, it's definitely possible. Some of the most kind of striking, distinct and engaging marketing I receive when I'm in journalist mode comes from kind of a low budget or zero budget context. But we're here, you know, hopefully with some practical stuff, some encouraging, realistic, pragmatic stuff, getting your game noticed or exposed, kind of retaining players, that side of marketing, growing your business, biz dev, and even towards kind of getting your business out in front of investors or an audience or whatever it is. We're going to try and cover that all, which means I should stop talking quite so much because we've got about half an hour. I'll tell you what, I had some more notes, but you've already heard enough of my voice, I feel. So I'll do some very brief introductions. I'll let them introduce themselves again, hearing too much of this. But a warm welcome, let's break the ice with a warm welcome to Matilda from Reaktor, Daff from Dimoso, and Aras from Tencent. Yeah, so let's start with that. I'll start with you, Matilda, as you're closest to me. Just a quick intro to yourselves and your time and role in games.
Great. So hi everybody, my name is Matilda. I work at Reaktor, but the creative side of Reaktor. So we're a tech company, but we also have a small in-house creative team that serves all kinds of clients that we have. So I work in brand strategy, and I'm also a senior creative. I've been doing lots of different kinds of campaigns and research for a variety of different clients from different industries.
Great.
Thank you.
Daff.
Cool. My name is Daff. I work as the managing director of a company called Dimoso. And we are a marketing agency that basically has been working with apps and the mobile gaming industry since the birth of the App Store. And what we do is help app companies grow their users or help them get awareness, get more investment, and so on. So that's what I do.
Okay, I'm Aras. So I'm currently handling the regional publishing for Tencent in Eastern Europe. And my background is a little bit different. So I'm coming from FMCG, like Unilever and L'Oreal in marketing. So I spent half of my career in marketing roles there. And then the last 12 years, I'm in gaming, basically publishing games such as PUBG Mobile, Honor of Kings, and games like that. Yeah.
So, you know, there's so many ways we could start this conversation. I'm going to start with one that's fairly broad, hopefully to set the context. It may be that they now just talk and I don't say anything else, so I'll try not to let it play out like that. But, you know, the most fundamental form of game marketing, I guess, is getting your game noticed, played, and in the context of Pocket Gamer Connects, keeping those players. You know, in terms of just a starting point, are the channels you think of, marketing channels you think of particularly relevant for kind of lower to zero budget, that kind of space? And I guess I'm thinking something, you know, there's audience size, there's audience relevance. You know, sometimes the biggest audience isn't necessarily the ideal audience for a lower budget. I'll tell you what, I started with Matilda first. Aras, I'm going to spring this on you. So yeah, just some general starting points of reasonable channels you can start to think about with no budget, or low budget.
Yeah, I mean, I think like currently, like my expertise is coming on from mobile, so I'm not a.
Of course, yeah.
I'm not really. I mean, relevant information about PC or console, but lately we started to go into like cross platforms, but driven by mobile more, which is I think like it's much more accessible at the moment, especially you know currently when you look at the marketing practices that we are having, you know you don't have much time, so. You don't like announce your game like 6 months before anything. So it's like, you know, it's day to day. You keep, you know, trying to iterate your game, making it better. Like, you know, it's a development process in mobile. So you don't have much time actually when you really start to take it off to the communities. So that's why like I think like the main tools that we use here, I'm setting aside all the user acquisitions and stuff.
Yes,
all
yeah,
those,
yeah.
Because that's obviously for scaling
Yeah.
is necessary. It's like the necessary evil. But for us, it's like most important part is the community.
Yeah.
To drive the community in a ways that you can like really go low budget. This can be many different things which we can talk about, but also like apart from the community, the influencers and the opinion leaders. It doesn't have to be influencers actually, but it can be anyone that is like known by that specific genre of the game, which cannot be a big, huge influencer at that specific time, and differs by country. So which is good for us because then we can go really low budget and we can really like do stuff like that. So I think like the community and like the community is the key word here for us for going low budget. I mean that's my point of view. We can talk more about
and
the
community is something I'd love to come back to because I feel that's it's combining so many things, right? Community, I guess I feel as a writing for print, like influencers came along and suddenly I went, oh, the Guardian's not that important, but now there's this thing of community bringing so many things together. But welcome to talk about community or any other kind of, let's say, and none of you are allowed to do this. Let's say someone is only going to say 5 minutes and leave, like interest, the most relevant marketing channels for us to think about or talk about. Daff, I'm going to spring that on you next.
I think I love community as well. The problem is when you launch an app or a game, you might not have a community.
Yes, yeah.
So then it's quite hard. But if you do digital advertising right and you have a great product where you actually make money from, you should see like, okay, what is my cost per user I acquire? And you should make money. And at all platforms, I mean, you can start with £2 or £5. And
Right.
if you make a return on investment on that money, then you can add more. So really, you can go down one. I would say like the biggest platform is where it's the most competition, and that's why they're always going to be the most expensive. So I would always say like, okay, know your audience. I say that's like women in 40 to 50. There are a lot of places where they hang out online that isn't necessarily Facebook. It could be, another community that you can, hitchhike on. That is like a community for people riding horses in Northern England, 40 to 50, but has like, 100,000 people being active on the forum. So I would like say, number one, you should make a return on investment on the money you spend. So that's not really a problem. So you should not be scared by any platform, but also look for other platforms where your audience might be that is not the natural, like the top of mind ones.
Yeah, that thing of kind of the audiences that aren't most obvious is really interesting. I've seen it work with like promoting a game. Oh, everyone wants to send it to the big gaming publications. You're making a history RTS for mobile. Contact the history publications. It might be a smaller audience, but more relevant, right? So definitely would love to come back to that. But before that, Matilda, any kind of broad principle ones you feel are fitting or interesting?
These have been great points about channels and knowing your
sorry,
audience.
you had to go last.
Oh, it's okay. But what I'd like to add is sometimes it's good to try something new.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, I was working with a big name cider company, and we're trying to, basically their audience is primarily women, right? But what we did is we targeted these ads at men instead, who then, because they're usually not targeted by
Right.
this, like kind of female-forward material, they actually got really excited about that. And it actually stood out from the competition, so all these like beer brands and stuff, because it was out of place in a way. So sometimes going against the grain can really work for you too.
Yeah, and as that happens to be my next question, I don't want to be too constrained by what I've got written in front of me here. I'd love to, I guess leaning into not having the budget, what you can do. It's tempting to think, how can I copy or replicate what's done with a big budget? I'd be interested either more good examples or general thoughts about how you can really embrace what can stand out, or perhaps there's a real risk with that. Or it kind of sounds like there's an innate risk in kind of reversing advertising. So yeah, if anyone want to chip in on how worthwhile it is thinking about leaning into those kind of what you can only do with a lower budget.
I mean, I have to say about the risk was very low in this case. We tried out some Instagram ads and actually poll ads where people could participate. So the risk was relatively low and the payoff was relatively big. So I think if you just choose your mediums well, you can lower the risk, but then increase the opportunity to actually profit from it.
I think when you are a startup, you have the biggest advantage, and that is that you can be fast-paced. And when we look online and how fast-paced it is, if you work with, for example, Coca-Cola and you do the digital ads for them, you have to like get them approved, and it takes ages, and you cannot make 100 different ones and A/B test what actually works. You need to like come up with an idea, present it, and 2 years later you see the results, and that's not how you make efficient digital advertising. So I would say like test everything you can. And if you're starting out and you don't have any money, you have nothing to lose. We had a client once that basically due to like a fuck up in their product, they needed to spend a lot more money on development. So what they did, because they had no marketing budget all of a sudden, is that they went naked to Piccadilly Circus with just a sign on them saying download our app, and that worked.
You don't have to replicate that exactly, but there is a really interesting idea and principle there. Like Aras, I'd love to hear if you have any thoughts on.
Yeah, I think
or pros or cons.
I think players are quite fair in terms of like in the way what they expect from the gaming company. So the bigger the game, bigger the expectation, obviously. But they also understand that it depends on what you got. Yeah. If you're like up and coming a new game with like not much background, but it's like you need to cherish with that community of yours. And people I think players like to experience like real stuff. That they don't want like scripted things that are in their YouTube videos or whatever. So we see that there's a balance between the expectations of having a really scripted thing that you will shoot for them in terms of like a YouTube video or whatever. Practically like what we do right now is we are trying to find ways to show the real life examples of what's happening in the game. Like, for example, someone's like having a fun moment in the game, then you will try to put it on the physical world and shoot something with a low budget. And people like that sort of, different manifestation of the things that actually happening in the game.
Right.
I think that's a good example. Like, you can do that easily.
And that speaks to authenticity, right? Which I think really matters with many of the gaming audiences, right? And the examples Daff was talking about, like that lo-fi is kind of more low budget, lo-fi is more authentic or trustworthy. Does that make any kind of sense? I'm not saying big budget stuff isn't, but maybe to the consumer.
No, but I think that's absolutely true, especially if we look at younger audiences who are quite suspicious of the material that big companies have been putting out. So I think lo-fi definitely gives us an opportunity to talk about things in a far more believable way.
Yeah, sure. And that thing that as a journalist, it's easy for me to talk about PR, which isn't marketing, but that thing of speed, I felt that happen when I have to get something from a large organisation that might take a week and a half and 3 levels of approval, or email the human being that I need the quote from who can also send me the screenshots without watermarks. Like that speed thing, really, it can really give you a head start, right? What about, let's go back to community. I think that's such an interesting one. This idea, a game is kind of, community brings this power to a game that it's not just about when the game is on and being played, hopefully with your mobile games, that's 24/7 by millions of people, but the fact that there's all this other content being created for you, right, almost by your evangelists. What can a company or individual or team do to kind of build community, as Daff pointed out, and embrace the potential of that?
Yeah, I think from your general social media management perspective, it's pretty straightforward, right? Like you see the comments or the feedbacks that you're getting, but actually what we try to do is we try to create platforms that people can express about the game, not just in the general platforms, but your games platforms as well. So for example, creating contests about what should we put in the game next, or what's the best way to see yourself in the game, or whatever is necessary in terms of creativity, because you'll be surprised how many people actually want to contribute because they think that they are the experts of the game, and most of the time they kind of unlock stuff that you couldn't with your limited capacity of developing new content. So most of the time you just look at it and you'll see your next 6 months content written all over your posts and comment sections. So it's kind of important to create some platforms, not just social media, but some contests, that sort of thing, in my opinion. We do it and it works really well, I think. But it's difficult because then you create an expectation as well, because they want to see those things in the game as well, so which might be feasible or not feasible or other way around.
Yeah, I think when it comes to community, it can be quite tricky if you're just a small game. I mean, if you have a big game like Halo or Call of Duty, yeah, sure, there are 1,000 things to do, 1,000 things to discuss. If you're just launching a game, it's harder to have enough topics to keep people engaged. So what I would say is also that, like, piggyback on other trends where what your audience is interested in. Like, if we, for example, form a community, we don't just have to talk about this panel. It's going to run out, you know, it's not going to be fun for that long. But we four can speak about, you know, who get the drunkest in here tonight, or like other things that we are as well would be interested in. Like, piggyback on that. And then I would say, I mean, the best thing is when you can have community in your own product, like Farmville or whatever, but go to other communities and make them your community, if that makes sense.
Great. And if you had anything to add on community?
I mean, I thought that was a really great point, but then that requires you to really understand the community, not come in there to evangelize about your product, but to really try and listen to them and maybe participate in the conversation and try and learn the lingo and help you behave in that community in a respectful way.
I was interested as well to hear, you know, you talked about piggybacking. Are there other kind of ways you can kind of piggyback on existing momentum, be it trends or, you know, presence in the industry? You know, quite frankly, one of the gains I get from being on the stage as somebody who's worked from home for years is people in the industry see me, I have conversations, like that's kind of what it's my own one-person company marketing campaign. But, you know, whether it's getting on stages, presence in the industry, other events, piggybacking on trends, what kind of existing things can people apply their limited budgets to?
Well, if you look at other platforms that would be relevant to you, like another product or game that has managed to reach an audience that you would like to have, a lot of them don't have enough content on their own in their own game, or like if you launch a metaverse, you don't have enough things there to keep people engaged. So instead of like paying for exposure, you could help them develop something that would engage them and also draw them to your own platform, your own product.
Anyone else want to?
Yeah, I think like, you know, the platforms that are more popular tend to be the more expensive ones because of the return on investment is clear, then you can track everything and stuff like that. So I think like it's our job to catch the, you know, like the next thing that is going on in the social media. Like, you know, the attention span for your target audience is getting shorter and shorter. So you need to be able to like squeeze in stuff that are going to be interesting for them at first glance, right? So that they're going to see then, oh, what's this? I'm going to click and watch that thing. And I'm not talking about user acquisition videos. So I'm talking about content. And that's why like in the games right now, we need inside the game platforms to show that kind of, you know, interaction. I think it's, when you look at the top games right now, they all have some sort of platform in the game already.
Right, yeah.
You can watch stuff, right? Like you can engage. You know, PUBG Mobile has an Instagram lookalike social media in the game, for example. Why? Because like people tend to share more stuff inside it instead of like going into other platforms and do it, because like the games are getting bigger and bigger and so on. But for like a smaller budget, of course, you need some, at least like some sort of, you know, community engagement in the game itself. It can be, you know, like anything. But I think it's very important to start doing that from the development stage, because if it gets popular, if you're smaller, you need more of in-the-game stuff instead of going on social media, because it will be more expensive.
Sure.
And then one thing actually that we haven't talked about yet is just the consistency. I feel like a lot of people falter with their messaging. I feel like we tend to start trying to kind of safeguard everything and push every kind of message to every kind of people that we think might engage them. Yeah. Whereas I think, especially if you're on a lower budget, it's really important to know what you stand for and what your main message is, and then be consistent with that on a brand level. Otherwise, people will never recognize you when they see your messages out in the wild.
Right, and that makes me think that consistency and getting your brand messaging in place. You know, some people here in the room, I assume, are going to be doing the game design and development and marketing part. Like, when in that development process to start thinking about the branding? To start, to, you know, I guess to a degree, some might argue development and game design shouldn't be controlled or guided by marketing, but at the same time, I guess maybe at the game design document stage, you're also starting to think about the marketing message. You're nodding the most, Matilda, so you get to answer that one first.
Well, I actually really believe in cross-pollination from the very early stages. I think if you have anybody in charge of brand or marketing, they should be in there to see what happens when the game is being developed, when the story is being developed, so they know to tack onto the right things and they know where everything started from. So I really believe in ultimate transparency even within teams, so that not that the marketing meddles with the product itself, but that they know what's going on.
Yeah, and I guess that's another opportunity. If you're a smaller studio, you've got less layers of management.
Absolutely.
It's easier to stand by the person's desk.
Absolutely.
Right?
No titles, no CMOs, or nothing. You can really share this information, and you should share it. It benefits your entire team.
Yeah, any other thoughts on kind of that? I guess it's the melding of the design and development process with marketing.
I mean, I might be slightly subjective in the area, but I would say you develop your brand before you develop your product.
Right.
Because, I mean, so many times we see companies, well, great products, but no one is playing them because they never thought about how to actually get people to use them. And then if you look at the big guys, like the Fortune 500 companies, when they are developing a new project or a new product, the first thing they do is develop like the branding, the marketing strategy, then they actually develop the product. And that is kind of like what you need to start with, because that's what is, marketing is your way of making money. So if you first develop a product and then the marketing, which 99% of all the games does, they find out after they launch it, okay, they didn't work, now we do need to pivot, and now we need to pivot, and now we need to pivot, and that is just takes time and costs money. Start with the marketing, then develop the product. That is what I would say.
And I guess that can be a positive for, you know, again, don't want to meddle with the game design, but that can give your game an identity. It can help the game design process, right? Identity and the feeling and the voice of the game and so on. Is that a reasonable thing to say? I know you don't have to speak as a game designer, Daff.
Well, absolutely. But I mean, it's the same thing when you work with a music artist, they want to, you know, if you talk about, oh, you should do this song because this will sell really good, they will be like, no, but it's not my creative vibe, and so on. And the same thing comes to gaming. So if you're a game developer, I have the respect for that you want your creativity because you're an artist in that sort of way. But still, you need to make money, so you need to start with the marketing.
And in a way, like the marketing department isn't the devil, or branding isn't the devil. But it's quite often people see it as something like extraneous that you need to put it on top of it. But it could, like you said, it definitely should be created hand in hand, and that's
you know, I haven't really thought of that, but maybe one of the most important things with low budget marketing is thinking about it positively, right? Not that's thinking true. Of this negative you've got to embrace. Aras, if you wanted to pick up on it, that if not.
No, I mean, it's okay. I mean, pretty much covered.
Daff, something else you said was interesting right at the beginning was that idea of you can still do things like the budget things, advertising, right? You put in a very modest amount, you make more than that. I presume you could sink that into more, to all of you, but maybe to you first, Daff, just to elaborate on that point. Like, why should people still consider those budget marketing things like ads?
Yeah, I mean, there are, of course, like if you're a company, you're launching a product, there's, of course, what is your goal with getting users on board? A lot of the time, startups, it's because they want to raise more money. And then you just need to show figures a lot of times. So then you need to, you can have quite crappy users. You just need to show a number for an investor. But, I mean, the biggest strength you have as a startup is, the ability to be fast-paced and test. And you can test 1 million things and see what actually works. And I mean, we've done things where we have, not even had a game, tested 100 different ideas, see what has worked. Okay, cool, this is what works. Now we develop the branding, then we develop the game.
One more, and then I've got loads more questions, but I'll give you guys a chance to answer some. So I should have given you a bit more fair warning to start using the old brain and come up with some better questions than mine. But last one, we've definitely been talking about games, and those will be transferable, I presume, to like biz growth, like marketing of your business. But any particular considerations or advice, particularly like if you're not marketing your game, you're marketing your game company, be it a studio, service provider, or is it as simple as same rules apply?
Well, I think like there's the rule set is slightly different. If you think of a game, you want it to become a phenomenon. Your company doesn't necessarily have to become a phenomenon, but it needs to still have a consistent story, because I think everything is storytelling at the end of the day. So your company also needs to have a good story that you can tell, that people can really, your investors or anybody you might encounter can hold on to and understand. So slightly different, but interlinked.
Yeah, no, that makes me think, right, we are all in the end humans, and stories are what engage us, right? Whether it's about a game or about a company. Anything else on that kind of, if there's anything distinct to the business marketing? If not, I'm going to throw it open to this lot.
Shoot the next question. I think you answered brilliantly.
Excellent. Right, well, does anybody, look, this is a great opportunity to ask three experts about how you might market things if you're on a lower budget. So, can't someone break the ice and throw a hand up? Otherwise, I'm going to have to look at mine again. Am I missing any hands?
No, you're going to have to carry on, Will.
Oh, God. It's all right. We've got 4 minutes, although I'm going to have to open my pad again. I was confident in you lot. I'd closed it. I guess, look, we're talking about kind of what can be done, and we're talking about practically. Obviously, the key challenge here is budget. Other challenges people should be aware of. We've already talked about some things like the timing you pick in terms of what else is going on. Any particular challenges beyond not having much cash?
The time, because, budget is really secondary, but because there's always things you can do, but the time it takes. And you need, when you start up, you need to engage with people. You need to get your brand out there. And that takes a lot of time. It's like, once again, when you develop your game and then you're going to launch, and then you're like, okay, well, this will take us 6 months to actually, come up with ideas and figure out what is working for us, stuff like that. So it will take a lot of time, and that's the biggest thing.
And then maybe piggybacking on that, just because it doesn't work right away doesn't mean that it doesn't work.
Right.
Because when you're starting something new, just putting that message out there and repeating it enough times that people remember it and recognize and understand it, just because it doesn't work overnight, doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing something wrong. It could just mean that exactly what you said, and you need more time.
And any other examples of just kind of, repeat examples, interesting examples you've seen of where you feel lower budget marketing stuff has gone well?
Well, a lot of them, and I guess that all companies started out on a low budget most of the times.
Yeah, good point.
So basically, I guess every company that is big today has done it well.
Yeah, but that is an interesting point, right? You can look to what's interesting, big and small, and consider how you can embrace some of the learnings from a lower budget.
One thing that Candy Crush, they have done very traditional advertising, but when they started out, they understood one thing in their gameplay user acquisition videos that they put out, and it was not like what they showed in their gameplay, because personally I think gameplay videos are quite boring to watch, but they really showed the benefits, and they were focused on the feeling you get when you play rather than showing the functions of the game. Which was really smart.
Yeah, and when I do marketing copy, the feedback I often get is focus more on the benefits and less on the product, right? It's why do you want this? Why is it worth having? Rather than simply showing the product. Obviously, to any potential clients, I do perfect copy every time. We have got just over 60 seconds. One last chance if anyone wants to ask a question. I feel like I'm in an auction. The moment someone slightly moves, I hope it's a hand going up. But no. Okay. I guess to whip to the, we've asked the questions about timing. Do you know what? We've got less than 50 seconds now. I can see the people involved probably don't want me to start asking another question and running over. So thank you for your attention. I hope that was useful for you and you got some real practical stuff you can take home or back to the team and turn into success. And an applause for yourself for your attention, applause for our lovely experts.